Welcome everybody, this is Rabbi Avi Tenenbaum, and I was asked to do a follow-up video after the video that we released 7 days ago. We're going to talk today about suicide and suicide prevention, and we're going to talk a little bit about the current events and what's been going on. And when somebody tells over when things are going on, they're saying it from their position. So I'm limited in where I am in the world and the information that comes to me. So whatever I share with you, bear in mind that that's, within the scope of what I see and how I understand it and the information that comes my way. But nonetheless, I feel it's worth sharing. And I suspect, I hope, I feel that we are in a historic moment right now in modern day Klal Yisrael history where Rabbanim after Rabbanim are stepping up and making their opinions very clear that we have no tolerance for abuse and not for perpetrators. And by the way, it's not only sexual abuse, it's abuse of every kind, because there are many types of abuse. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go learn about that. There's domestic abuse, there's elder abuse, there are many types of abuse, but we are going to give a voice to the people who have no voice, who are being swept under the rug in the name of all sorts of, ideals. We're going to not mince words. We're going to be as open as we can. No sugarcoating, no beating around the bush. We want to make sure that Klal Yisrael is pure from evil, and that the people who are being victimized and destroyed and stripped of their dignity are going to be given back that dignity that they deserve, and given back the voice, and be heard and understood and helped. And this is what we're trying to do right now. And to quote my Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Moshe Meiselman Shlita, in a powerful talk he gave 2 days ago, the majority of serious Rabbanim in the world are of this opinion, and saying that it is not possible, it's simply not possible that we're going to use different Torah concepts, constructs, and ideals to perpetuate bad things and bad people and the destruction of human lives, Jewish lives, in our community. That's impossible. This is not the das of the Torah, and we are going to give a voice to survivors. We're going to support them, and we're going to do whatever we can to help them. And if they're being abused right now, we want to convey to them that there's hope, and this is your time, and ask for help, and you're going to be heard, you're going to be taken seriously. This is the time. And we really hope that people are going to treat you with the dignity that you deserve. And if you are in a authority position as a Rav, educator, therapist, or whatever it might be, of course, we're going to assume also that you're going to give those survivors the respect and the dignity that they deserve, and to hear them out, and to take them very seriously and give them the help that they need. And if you want to hear the strong words of my Rosh Hashiva, Moshe Meiselman Shlita, you can look that up on the website nermichael.com. And if you would like to get a link to that and don't know how to find the Ner Michael website, send me an email at avitenenbaumpfa@gmail.com. Okay, so we said that Reb Meiselman is not the only opinion. He was saying that this is the majority opinion of serious Rabbanim, and I've been in touch with Rabbanim every single day since this story has been unfolding. And I'm not kidding you. That's not an exaggeration. It's been overwhelming. Rabbanim, survivors, everyone's been holding conversations. These are important conversations to have. And we truly hope that this is going to make a positive change in Klal Yisrael that's going to give credence and legitimacy and strength to the people that need that strength to step up and report what they need to, and to get the help that they deserve, and to become, healthy, productive members of society. And they've always deserved that, and it's been taken away from them, and it's our time to give that back to them and help them get on their feet, and take them seriously, listen to them, and give them the help that they need. Okay, so we're going to talk about suicide. The name of the talk is Harming the Tzelem Elokim, and if you're wondering why, Avi, did you call it that, you're going to see soon. We're going to talk about that. Here's my email, avitenenbaumpfa@gmail.com. Here's my website. If you go on YouTube, there's a link there to my back page of this website where we have Torah classes about a lot of topics related to what we're going to talk about today. It's called Torah for Real People. That's the name of the YouTube channel. If you want, you can ask for the link to the back page of psychotraumaunit.com. I think it's front/TorahForRealPeople.com or something like that. And there you can see some of the classes on things that we're going to be talking about today and related topics without going to YouTube. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that weeks before Chaim Walder took his life and this unfortunate young woman in Yerushalayim took her life, I spoke to Hagoin Rav Asher Weiss Shrita about how to speak about suicide, and it is really not clear and not simple when we talk about suicide in public, how we talk about suicide. There are many facets of it. As usual, things are complex. There's no simple answer. Nothing's black and white. There's a lot of gray in the world, a lot of colors. And I was asked a few weeks ago to talk at a yahrzeit of a very special young woman who took her life due to mental illness. And, and they said, can you talk about suicide and compassion and how to kind of understand why people take their lives? Are there different types of people? How does the Torah view this? And all this type of thing. So I went to Hagoin Rav Asher Weiss Shrita, and he said that when you feel it is appropriate to talk about suicide, then you always need to talk about two things at the same time. You need to talk about Kedushas HaChaim. You need to talk about the importance and greatness of life in the absolute obligation of preserving one's life. And that is never going to change an iota. And then sometimes people take their lives, and after the fact, we're left grappling, trying to understand it, and in certain circumstances that the Torah prescribes, we can extend to them compassion and understanding. And we're going to get into all the details of this soon, but this was basically the point of Rav Asher Weiss. And I have to add that I think maybe what the Rav was referring to is that, not everything is always a good idea to talk about in public, and that's not because we're trying to sweep anything under the rug, but because sometimes when we talk about something too much, it can make certain people who are predisposed to make a poor decision to make those decisions. And so, for example, if you look in the greater secular world about glorifying school shootings, so a lot of people say that they're not going to publicize the names of the shooters and things like this, because when we give those people kavod and we glorify those things, it allows and enables and encourages more people to take similar actions. And we found something like this in the world of suicide as well, and that's why a lot of media outlets do not publish information about suicide. And at the same time, we're struggling with an idea of stigma of suicide. So there's a lot of parts and pieces that go into this. It's complex. And it's not always a matter of trying to sweep things under the rug that we don't talk about something. I was told by a colleague, I think it was Sunday, that he knew a young man who took his life by suicide, and they made a very, very big funeral for him and gave him tremendous kavod. And as a result, the next day, that person's best friend took his life by suicide as well. And people were left wondering, is that related to the way they related to the person the day before? So these are difficult questions. These are not simple things to discuss. We're going to touch on some of these topics. But one thing for sure is that right now, this is on the table. It's the elephant in the room. And Eis Ases La Hashem, Heferu Tairasecha. There is no question right now that we need to be talking about suicide and how the Torah views this. How do we relate to this? We can't be afraid to use the word suicide. This is not a dirty word. And this is Ayla al HaPerek. Everyone's discussing it. They're thinking about it. And it would be a disservice to just let this whole story, roll over and not to relate to the high-profile suicides that we saw, because we need to really clarify this sugya. And it came up. Hashem is putting it in our Beis Medrash, in our face. And so here it is. And I think it's the Ratzon Hashem to discuss it right now. And that's why we're going to go into this. I discussed this topic with a number of Rabbanim and with Rav Asher Weiss Shrita, and don't blame any of them if I misunderstand anything, but I am going to try to give you, to the best of my knowledge, how the Torah views suicide. And again, I discussed this with a number of Rabbanim, and this is my understanding as well. And let's jump into this. So if you look on the screen, we spoke about Rav Asher Weiss, and he said that you cannot talk about suicide and compassion for people who took their lives without strongly first talking about Kedushas HaChaim. So we're going to remind ourselves of that as well. We have an obligation to save our lives, and if we're a person that's struggling with thoughts of suicide, then we need to do whatever we can to help ourselves. And this is our greatest priority. This is the most important mitzvah that we have. I said in another video recently that this is your Shabbos, this is your Tefillin, this is your Lulav, this is your greatest mitzvah, this is pikuach nefesh. This is the biggest mitzvah. This is the nachas ruach that Hashem gets from you, and we have to try to keep ourselves alive. We have to get the help that we need. If we need to share this with a trusted person, if we need to go to a psychiatric hospital, if we need to go to a therapist, we need to tell our best friend, our Rav, and we need to do something about this. This is the greatest mitzvah that you can do, is to preserve your life. There are treatments out there for people who are struggling with these issues. I know a bunch of people who have been struggling with this for years, and they're alive, and they're happy, and they're productive. They're wonderful people. Some of them are my very close friends. They're just fantastic people. I need to say that a lot of people struggle with suicidal thoughts. I've had thoughts like this over several different times in my life. I'm not ashamed to say this. This is not some sort of shameful thing. I always say that we should be ashamed of using our free will to do aveirus. That's something that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for me to make bad choices purposely with free will and to be myred against Hashem. That's something we should be embarrassed about, and the Gemara talks about this in Maseches Brachos. It says, Chatzuf man demefarish chata, right? A person who just goes around and is careless about the Ratzon Hashem and rebels against Hashem, that's embarrassing. That's shameful. But the fact that we have some sort of a mental health struggle, nisayon, challenge, issue, illness, this is not something any person chooses. This is not something that anybody wants. This is not something that's a sin. And okay, so this happens. This is part of life. This is part of our avodas Hashem. This is what makes us great, is that we're put in this world. We have these nisyanos. We have to overcome them and figure them out. And so I've had thoughts like this over the past. And so we're going to talk about suicide prevention, and then we're going to move on into the Torah things about suicide. So suicide prevention is the body of knowledge and tools about how to hopefully prevent suicide amongst other people in the community, whether we're a teacher in a school, whether these are our loved ones that we're trying to protect, a neighbor, who knows, somebody in the shul. And there's a whole body of knowledge of this. There are experts in this. There are wonderful organizations and Jewish organizations that give trainings in these things. And so I would suggest that together with your community, Rabbanim, if they feel this is appropriate, and the different Jewish organizations and experts, if they can get together and hold a conversation and make a decision that this is the right thing to do to train mechanchim, Rabbanim, and community leaders and people in the community, who, especially those who interact with a lot of people, Tzelem members, about suicide prevention. How do we profile somebody that might be at risk for suicide, and what do we do? Right? And what is the urgency of their problem? And do they need to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance? Do we bring a psychiatrist on board and wait, a few days till we get an appointment if that is necessary? What do we do? How do we do it? How do we hold those conversations? And again, there are some great Jewish experts, mental health professionals on these topics. There are a lot of Rabbanim that are involved and have done this type of training and are aware of this type of thing. And they do this type of work too, and they've saved some lives. And again, this is called suicide prevention, so I behoove anybody who's listening to this to consider holding conversations with Rabbanim and with the mental health professionals to talk about this and to consider having this type of education in the community. Okay, so that's suicide prevention. I was tempted, and I actually made an earlier recording, I was tempted to teach this myself right now. This is something that I'm certified to teach. But, nothing's going to replace a bona fide training, and this is a major topic, and people's lives are at stake. So we're not going to do such a thing now. I am going to behoove you and ask you to learn this from the mumchim, the experts in your community. What I will say, though, is if you come across a person that you think is struggling with suicide, possibly, ask them. Find the right time, find the right place in a sensitive way, to ask them and say, are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you having thoughts of killing yourself? And don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed, and don't feel awkward. And you should know if you feel awkward and uncomfortable, that person's going to feel uncomfortable too. And they're carrying a secret, and it's shameful to them. It's hard for them to share this and divulge this with you. And so if the shoyal, the person trying to help and do an intervention, is uncomfortable, that's for sure going to make the other person uncomfortable. And then not only did we not do an intervention, we harmed in the name of help. So we don't want to do that. That's pointer number one, is we have to be really comfortable holding these conversations. If you need to rehearse this, practice this, learn the skills of how to hold such a conversation, the right words to say, be normal, be calm, be genuine, give them a chance to share, listen to them, let them feel that they're heard, validate their feelings, let them know that it was okay that they shared this with you. Keep this confidential on the one hand and respect them. And on the other hand, if they do have a plan to take their life, then of course we need to tell them that we can't keep that a secret because that's going to jeopardize their safety. And this is all stuff that I'm, as you can tell, really tempted to teach. But I'm going to ask you instead to get this training at least once in your life. Do this training, know about this, and you can really save a life. I have no doubt that Hashem might bring somebody one day your way, and you can possibly save their life. And especially if you're a public figure, you're a person that deals with a lot of people, and you have influence, I think this is an incredible skill set to have, perhaps even an obligation. And I encourage you to do so. So that's tip number one, is to be comfortable and use the word suicide. And you should know that people who struggle with suicidal thoughts or that even plan suicide, they feel relieved when somebody comes over to them and discusses with them about this, and they can get that off their chest, that somebody asked them about it and somebody's interested in helping them and trying to connect them to the, professional services and interventions that they need. So don't be afraid that by saying the word suicide it's going to make anything worse. It's not, and might even be relieving to them. I had a person come over to me 2 days ago, a wonderful person, and we were talking about this topic, and I was using the word suicide, and I wasn't mincing any words, and they came over to me and they said, I appreciated so much that you kept using that word. You know how many people dance in circles and do somersaults and flips, and they'll say anything but the word suicide, but it's a real word, it's a real concern, it's a real thing that some people struggle with, and I'm so happy that you were able to talk about it in that way and make us feel comfortable with the things that we, struggle with and have to confront. So that is that. The second tip that I have for you is make sure that anytime you ever approach anybody and try to help them, that you have some sort of number resource that's a legitimate professional resource, obviously, already at hand with the phone number. You make sure that they're available before you approach the person. Because what happens is, if you go and you approach somebody and they're intimate with you in the way that they share that information, they've told you their dark secret, they've opened themselves up to you, they've really trusted you, but then you have nothing to offer them, and then it takes you, 4 days until you figure out what to do. That's not a pleasant experience. And so before you approach that person, if you could afford to, if it's not immediately urgent and an emergency, have some sort of a phone number of a mumche, an expert, an organization, if they need an ambulance. So you have the number to an ambulance. There are going to be 2, maybe 3 types of categories. I'm going to say this real quick, and this, again, is not replacing the need to learn this stuff from an expert in your community, to do such a training and get the tools and the knowledge and the practice of having these conversations for the day that this is going to be needed. And by the way, this is not only about suicide prevention, this is also the skill of how to approach people and to connect them to help for addiction and for depression and for eating disorders and so many other things too. You see somebody that's struggling, they're having a hard time. There's a whole simon like this in Shulchan Aruch. You see somebody that's drowning, bandits are jumping up on them and trying to mug them and harm them, and you could do something about this. We're mechuyev, we're obligated to intervene and to take actions and steps that we're able to do in order to save that person. This is an obligation, and again, I encourage you to get this training. So there are going to be basically 3 categories of people. When we approach somebody in the right way, that I barely spoke about how to do that, get that training, they're going to basically give 3 answers. When I say, are you having thoughts of suicide? One group is going to say no. Okay? Another group is going to say yes, and then we're going to see about the yes. In the no world, hopefully they're saying no because they don't have thoughts of suicide, but there's going to be a group of people that they're saying no because we didn't make it comfortable enough for that person to share. And maybe they suspect or feel that we're so uncomfortable with this that they're afraid to share it, or we're judging them, or we're going to be quick to be like Shlomo HaMelech and just try to fix them and tell them what to do and give them advice instead of, trying to step into their shoes and listen to them and validate them and really let them feel that they're being heard. Okay? So if they're saying no, we hope, and probably it's because no, but think about, did you really make this a safe enough environment and situation for that person to be honest with you? Do you have a kesher with them like that? Okay? And if not, that's a problem. And then how could we expect them to be completely open about such scary, overwhelming things if we didn't make the environment safe enough for them to share that information? Okay? Now, let's say the person says, yes, I have thoughts of suicide. And then we're going to have some more categories, because some people only have thoughts of suicide, but they have no plan of taking their life. And that doesn't mean that that's a good thing and it's an okay thing and there's nothing to do. In fact, all the different categories that we're discussing, every single person, if you're concerned about them, we should be trying to connect them to help and encouraging them to speak to a therapist, and maybe they'll be able to share some intimate things there with the therapist that they didn't want to share with you, and you can make that connection, hold that conversation, make that shidduch, and connect this person to the professional help that they need. But you have a person, you ask him, are you having thoughts of suicide? And they say yes. So then you say, do you have a plan? Have you researched a particular method of how to do this? Do you have a time and place? Did you purchase anything for this? And so on and so forth. And you're trying to understand just how concrete is their plan, how urgent is it right now that they are, struggling with this? Is this something that they bought paraphernalia for this and they're going to do this tomorrow at noon? Or this is just something they've had these thoughts for about 3 years and they have no particular plan, but they're just struggling with these very intimidating, overwhelming, scary thoughts. So if they say they have thoughts of suicide but no plan, then of course we're going to connect them to help, and of course this is urgent. But I wouldn't say that it's the same as a person who's having a heart attack that you absolutely need to call an ambulance. But I would say it's for sure like a person who's really, really sick and he needs the first doctor's appointment right away, right? Sometimes a person has really high fever for like 2 days in a row and he takes all the different fever reducers and it doesn't help, and he's coughing really, really hard and this type of thing. So you might not call Hatzalah for that, but you sure are going to want to go to a doctor right away. Maybe you're going to need antibiotics, etc., right? And if we don't take care of it now, it can turn into something that could be life-threatening. So I would say that with that analogy, you can have a person who's struggling with these thoughts, and maybe right now they're not in immediate danger, but it's sure important and urgent to take care of. So don't walk away from this talk thinking that it's not something to take care of right away. But then you're going to have another type of person who not only do they have thoughts of suicide, but they have a practical plan, a concrete plan. They have paraphernalia, they have a time and place, any and all of what I just said. And of course, this is absolutely pikuach, nefesh, mamish. This is completely urgent on the highest level. This is an emergency. And you would call Hatzalah for such a thing. You would call 911. I want to talk for a minute about Hatzalah. There are many Hatzalahs in the world. They're very, very professional. Most of them are wonderful. They keep people's private information confidential. They're real mention, and they know how to relate to people in a compassionate way. They have experience with people in our community who are struggling with severe mental illness and depression and suicide and psychosis and all these different things. Don't hesitate to call Hatzalah if you think that they don't know how to handle it. I bet you they know how to handle it, and they're very professional. And if you're a Hatzalah member, I'm going to tell you, of course, keep keeping everybody's details secret and being as professional as you can, learning as much as you can, and relating to people with compassion. I've seen a lot of Hatzalahs around the world do this in the finest, most professional way. Very impressive. So one thing we can do is we can call Hatzalah. We have a person right in front of us. They're in danger. We could tell them together. This is not something that we're tricking them about. We want to hold a conversation with the person who's at risk and say, we're going to call Hatzalah now. I'm worried about you. We need an ambulance to take you to the hospital. I want you to be able to speak to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is, going to be able to assess you and see what you need. And maybe they're going to give you medication, and they're going to watch you and make sure that you're safe and that you don't harm yourself. Okay? Have that conversation with the person. Don't walk away and say, oh, Avi Tenenbaum taught us how to do it. I'm not teaching you how to do it, but I am giving you a little bit of a heads up of what you're going to learn about how to do. And this is so important to have that conversation collaboratively, without beating around the bush, not awkwardly, confidently, but again with collaboration, because we don't want to trick them. We don't want to lie to them. That's going to ruin and destroy their trust in authority figures. That's going to ruin their ability to trust therapists in the future or rabbanim. We definitely don't want to trick people. Obviously, if a person right now is standing with a dangerous object about to harm themselves and they're not being collaborative, well, then we have to take extreme measures. We're going to call the police, and the police are going to come together with 911 or Hatzalah, and they're going to take the person to be hospitalized and treat them as needed in order to save their life. So yes, there is a situation like that, but I would tell you that in most situations that you're ever going to encounter, if at all, you can do this collaboratively. You can respect the other person as much as you can give them the ability to choose. Let them choose. If there's two hospitals, and they're both the same as far as there's a psychiatrist there that can meet this person in the emergency room and assess the level of risk, maybe give them that choice. Let's talk with them together and say, would you prefer this hospital or that hospital? Has this ever happened to you before? Do you have a file in one of these hospitals? Would you prefer that your best friend come with you as well, or just that I should come with you, etc. Okay, so again, I'm not trying to replace any sort of training. There's so much to say. I am hesitant. I keep wondering if by me saying this, I'm being gorea more than I'm maisiv. So I'm trying to be very careful here. Okay, but we said, don't be awkward, be comfortable. And the second thing we said is, come prepared with a plan and with a phone number. If a person needs an intensive outpatient, program or things like this, there's things like that too. Maybe that's all they need. But you know what? If you're not an expert in this, you're not a psychiatrist that makes these types of assessments, or a psychologist that's a big expert in this type of assessment, then this is not our place to decide. You know whose place it is to decide? Those people. So again, if a person is in immediate danger, they have some sharp object or some sort of thing that they can harm themselves with right now, and we might be jeopardized with our safety, their safety is jeopardized, and they're not being collaborative, then we call the police. And they'll get an ambulance to come and request an ambulance, of course, as well. And if it's a person who isn't standing with such an object, but they have thoughts of suicide and a plan to carry this out, or maybe they have some paraphernalia, and they're really serious, and they're not just, having these thoughts, but they've taken that to the next level, then we absolutely want to connect them right now to a emergency room psychiatrist that's going to assess them and decide what's the safest way to keep this person alive, safe, and to bring them back to a place where they're not feeling in such a crummy way, right? And then if you have a person who just has thoughts of suicide but absolutely no intent or plan to carry anything out, and for all you know, this is something they've been having for many years, they may be in therapy, they may not be in therapy, they used to be in therapy, they had to stop because they couldn't pay for it, they had it when they were in Eretz Yisrael, but now they moved to America. You don't know the story, ask some questions, connect them to community resources. There are some wonderful, from Jewish, very professional organizations, psychologists, clinical social workers, people that really deal with this stuff. They've saved a lot of lives. We want to thank them for their work. We want to encourage all the professionals who deal with this to keep learning and being the best that they can be. They're mamish matzah nefashos. And anyhow, there's great resources out there. Everybody deserves help. There's also people in the community who have struggled through this, and they can share their experience, strength, and hope. They've gotten better. And so for somebody that's hopeless, sometimes a professional can connect that person to somebody else. They'll put them in a group, and they can share those experiences together. And you can see you're not alone. You're not the only one with this. There's people that have gone through this. They've learned some great tools, and they are able to manage this and have a very amazing life with so much more quality and simcha, and to be productive and everything else. Okay. Ad Kan Hakafa Aleph, that was about suicide prevention, and really the main thing I want you to know is go learn it, go get good at it, and then go do it and save lives. The second thing we're going to talk about now is what the Torah says about suicide prevention. Now we're going to slow down a little bit. I was at a virtual conference to prevent suicide, I think it was 3-4 years ago, and there was a person who lost a loved one to suicide at this conference, and then they themselves were, having thoughts, struggling with taking their own lives or not, and they got the help that they needed with a very famous special psychiatrist here in Eretz Yisrael, and they were speaking at this conference, and they were the MC, so they were running the show. And they said in the introduction to the event, and this event, by the way, had all of Israel's top researchers and experts, professors, leaders of organizations that deal with suicide prevention and treatment of depression and self-harm and these related topics. And so the person talking said that one of the most important things that you're not going to hear, but that saved their life, was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I was listening to this talk, and I'm probably the only religious person. I wear a black kippah, right? I wear a kippah. I mean, I have a kippah. That's already a start. I think I was the only religious person that I saw connected to this event. Maybe there were more. I don't remember more. I'm sure there were. But, and I'm sitting at this conference with people that are not religious, and the person, completely to my surprise, says, one of the most important people and characters that kept me alive and gave me the strength that I needed was the writings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I was blown away. I could not believe that somebody in this venue, in this setting, would say such a thing. I was shocked. And so the next year, I called that person up because I know them. I collaborated with them once on a project. And I said, last year you said at your conference about Rabbi Nachman of Breslov that he really gave you the strength to save your life. So if it's okay, invite me to speak at your next conference, and I'm going to say some things from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov that I think can help people who are struggling to get some hope. And they said, no, like ad kan, like that's already too much. It's good for me, but let's not share it with other people. So this is a little bit of my revenge. We're going to talk about Rabbi Nachman of Breslov somewhat tonight. I actually had to trim this talk down because it would have gotten too long. There's so much to say. There really is so much to say. How could he talk about life and death, and simcha, and despair, and all these topics? This is something that we work on over a lifetime, and we talk about in many different facets. We're going to have to talk about this for the next several decades. This is not something you can cover in one talk. But we are going to cover some of these topics. Again, this is a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that I gave at a talk about suicide 2 days ago. I trimmed it a little bit. But we're going to talk about life and death, suffering, illness, das, mistakes, and compassion. So we said we're going to focus a little bit on Reb Nachman and his Talmidim and Talmidim, not because he's the only one that talks about some of these topics, but I think that, I try to learn all the different svarim that are out there and all the different types of tzaddikim and batei midrashim. In the same talk, I can quote the Alter of Slobodka and, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and, the Arizal, all in the same breath. And, these are all our tzaddikim and the svarim that they left and the legacy that they left for us to study. But Breslov svarim have a very unique emphasis on death, and I bet you weren't expecting to hear that because probably all the kesher that people listening to this have about Breslov svarim is, people taking drugs and dancing on vans and making a big ruckus. But if you actually read what the Talmidim of Reb Nachman teach and actually try to understand their svarim, you'll see that they talk about death constantly. And we're going to talk about death, and then we're going to talk about life, and we're going to talk about preserving life, and then people that didn't do that and how we view them. So this is a quote from Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman in the Sefer Kechvei Or, and I'm just looking to see what I wanted here. Right. Okay. So if you look in the middle of the page, or a little bit lower than the middle, it says, the idea of remembering that we're here in this world, things are so transient, things move so fast, and before you know it, we're going to die, and we're going to become, he says, like it says in Chazal, right? We're going to go to the grave one day, and we need to remember that. And this is not something that's meant to depress us. And right now I'm talking to very healthy people who are not struggling with mental illness in any way. So hear me out. This is not a talk specifically for people who are struggling with mental illness. This is a talk to the community leaders, rabbanim, therapists, and lay people. So as healthy people, it is healthy, and not necessarily a negative thing, but a positive thing, to remember that we're going to die, and to remember this every single day. And there are so many quotes about this in the Svarim. Here's another thing over here. This is this the mushal? I'm sorry, it's just the zoom square is over the things that I'm trying to quote, so I'm going to try to move the square a little bit to the side. Right, okay, so this is a mushal that Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, who was a Talmud of Rav Nachman of Breslov, he said a beautiful mushal that He said, let's say you have a person who deserves capital punishment, right? And there's some capital punishments today in Western society, but especially in the older world, this was something that was very common to find. Somebody did something that they deserve to die. And if you look in the Torah, we have Arba Misas, Bezdin, Skilas, Reva, Hereg, Chenek. So we have a Torah concept of this, where people make such mistakes that they need to be put to death, and that's a kapara for them. And there's a whole sugya on that. We're not going to get into that now. But imagine that a king has decreed upon somebody that he has to die. And so the police show up to his house with the paddy wagon and the horses, the horse and buggy police car of a long time ago, and they put him in the back, and they're taking him now to the king's palace where they're going to carry out his judgment. And this place is several days away. You know, he lives in this part of Europe, and they have to go to that part of Europe and do this on display in the official place at the official scheduled time. And he's alive right now, and he's going to be alive tomorrow. He's going to be alive the day after that. But he knows at the end of all this, he's going to finish. The gig is going to finish. And Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman Chazan, his name is this tzaddik who's writing in the Sefer, who had tremendous Yiras Shamayim, was a big paisek, big rav in their world at that time. He was saying that this is what our life is like. This is what our life is like. We know from the Ched of Adam Rishon that we're going to go one day. Death is no secret. It should come as no surprise. And what we're trying to do by talking about death is to not be as afraid of it and to use it in a positive way, to face it, to confront it, and to let it motivate us to make the best choices that we can and to be the best versions of ourselves. And people who make very bad decisions, they have such short-sightedness, and they're not thinking about the bigger picture. And so that's what these farmers are saying, is think of the bigger picture. Think every single day that one day you're going to give a reckoning on your actions, and use your time as best as you can. Make the best decisions that you can. You know, remember that you're going to be asked, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And this is meant to be a positive thing to motivate you to make good decisions. And you'll say, well, Avi, this just depresses me because I made so many mistakes. You know what? That's what tshuva is for. And you know why you're so depressed? Maybe because you don't believe that tshuva helps. And we have so many classes about this in the Torah for Real People group, and on the link that if you want the link to where you could see those classes on a website without YouTube, we give class after class about this. We can do tshuva. Hashem loves us. It says in the pasuk, Hashem does not want the death of a rasha. He wants him to live and to be happy and to be mative with him, and he just wants him to do tshuva. And there's hope for every single person, and we don't have to worry. But it is good for us to think about death, confront death, and let it be incorporated in our lives, and to use this as a way to motivate us to make the best decisions that we can. Here's another quote in the same sefer, V'zichroin yoyim hamaves nifsak mi machshavtoi afilu kisha'a kala. So if you know any Breslov person that only tells you things about happiness from Nachman, tell him that you once heard a class that it spoke over and over and over in those farm about death. And I think, by the way, these things of death, they make me happy. And I saw this mafurish in different svarim. I think I saw this from the Altar of Kelm and the Sefer Base Kelm. Is that the name of the Sefer? I forgot to put it in the presentation, but I believe the Altar of Kelm said that simcha comes through yira. Because why should he be happy? Because some sports team won, your home team won in a football game. Well, that's a nice thing, but, is that really going to give you such aisher and such meaning and purpose in your life and such simcha that you're going to be truly filled with simcha and walk around being happy? Probably not, right? It's going to probably not scratch any deeper than the surface, and that's it. And so the Altar of Kelm, if I'm not mistaken, says that simcha comes through yira. It comes through making good decisions, using your time properly, having your head on straight, making another good decision and another good decision. And guess what? If you made some mistakes, guess what the next step is? Make a good decision to do tshuva and to try to ask for help and to fix that. And simcha comes through that. So it should not come as a surprise when I say the way to be besimcha is by confronting death, remembering death, and remembering that, by making good decisions today, I'm going to be pretty happy when I go up to the next world and give a reckoning. I'm going to have what to show for myself. I'm going to fix the deeds and mistakes that things that I shouldn't have done. Yes, it's possible to fix. There are so many tires on this. I'm not going to start because otherwise this Zoom is going to go for, 20 hours. I'm tempted, I'll just say it now. We know this from Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says in Avos, Shuv Yom Echad Lifnei Misascha. You should return and do tshuva one day before you die. And the Mefarshim say, well, how do I know what day I'm going to die? Am I some makubal? Do I have Ruach HaKodesh? And the answer is, what they're saying is, of course, live every day as if it's your last day, and do tshuva every single day. Do tshuva every single day and live every day as if it's your last. And if you do that, you're going to be filled with simcha, you're going to have nachas, you're going to accept who you are and really be besimcha, like we said from the altar, that simcha comes through yira. This is a great thing to do. Okay, so here in Sichos Haran, I didn't have a Hebrew version at me at the time when I was putting this together, but if you look in the Sefer Sichos Haran, fascinating Sefer, translated in English by none other than Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, Zatzal. So Rav Nachman here says that life is full of suffering and to run to the Torah. Run to the Torah. He quotes the Shla. The Shla says, and you can look at the fascinating, amazing, poetic words of the Shla, Ein rega b'loi pega. There's no moment without, tragedy. Ein shah b'loi ra. There's no moment without something bad going on. Ein yoim b'loi reses v'ayom. Oh, here. Oh, I see. They translate it in English. There's no moment without its torment, no hour without its sour, and no day without dismay. Kol kavod to Rav Aryeh Kaplan, who got that to rhyme. Pretty impressive. We're here in this world. It's not an easy world to be in. It's hard to be a human being. We're not malachim. We're not animals. We're human beings. We have free will. We make mistakes. We go through suffering. If you look in the Sefer Chaye Olam of the Steipler, he has a whole chapter on this. I gave a whole TFRP class on this. If you want to hear that class and you don't know how to find it, ask me in my email. I'll send you the link. If you look in the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, we quoted in that class, the Ramchal says in the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, life is full of suffering. And the Ramchal there says that there's not even 1 in 1,000 people that has a perfect life. There's not even 1 in 1,000 people that has a perfect life. So it's hard to be a human being. It's hard to be here in this world. The Mesilas Yesharim is using that to show that therefore we know that the point of being in this world is for the next world. Ha'ilam hazeh, daima lepruzder b'fno ilam haba, and all those ideas. Right? Misha torach be'erev Shabbos, yalechel b'Shabbos, etc., etc. Ayin Sham in the Mesilas Yesharim. If you didn't ever read Sefer Mesilas Yesharim, start there. That is one of the most fundamental svarim in Judaism. I remember at age 16 reading that Sefer for the first time in my life, and it changed my life. I still have that edition in my house. It's very dear to me. I used to carry it around in my pocket and read it again and again and again, and I was always depressed, and I said, it's never going to change me, it's never going to help me. And somebody showed me a letter from the Steipler in Kraina de Igarta, which says that if you do it over and over, then over the years, it's going to have an effect on you. And so, learn Musar, learn these farm, they're life-changing. But to come back to the topic at hand, Rav Nachman says, life is full of suffering, and run to the Torah. And when we run to the Torah and we live according to the Torah and we get perspectives of how to view life from the Torah and we get strength with emunah and bitachon and viewing, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us certain tests and how to overcome those tests and how to go through those tests, etc., etc. There are so many Torah ideas, and then even stop sitting and just studying Torah and the sweetness of Torah and how that helps us to go through turbulent times. I know some people who are going through untold tragedy, terrible things, mamish, heartbreaking things, but they study Torah. I've seen Talmidei Chachamim who have lost children, who have lost parents, who have lost spouses, who have told me, without me asking, they said that because they learned, it helped them to go through the suffering. So, right, life is full of suffering, and the Torah offers us perspectives and tools on how to deal with them. Okay. Here's a really important quote from another sefer, again, going back to Kech Be'or of Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, a Talmud of Rav Nachman. He was a very big gadol in that world in those days. And he's quoting here Rav Nassan of Breslov, who was the top student of Rav Nachman. And he says here that a person who lives without death, without this awareness of death, he's like an animal who's just living instinctively, because we all know from the Targum Onkelos and so many different Musar Sfarim and Sefer Chavetz Chaim, we know so many Torah sources and Chazals about the difference between a man and an animal. And the difference is that an animal has no das. They have no higher consciousness and awareness. They have no free will, and they live instinctively. They get up, they do the same old thing, they go back to sleep, and all that. When a human being is alive, he has das. He is godly. He has the ability to make good choices, to make bad choices, to protect the world, to destroy the world, to be great, to be bad. He's able to see far into the future and to prepare today and work on himself today towards some greater thing in the future, like Olam Haba. And this is the das of a human being, the capacity of thinking and complex reasoning and imagination and so many different faculties that the human being was given. Angels do not have a Yetzer Hara, they have no urges, and animals don't have the ability to think for themselves in this complex way, but only the human being can, and that's what makes us so great if we make good decisions, and held accountable if we make bad decisions, and we have lots of classes on this too, and I'm tempted to just throw all the classes into this class, but that's just going to make a big challenge, and it's not going to taste very good, so go and watch the different classes that we give on this. So anyways, says Rav Nassan of Breslov, a person who lives without the continual awareness of death, that death is going to come one day, and he has to watch his actions, and he has to make good decisions. He's like an animal who lives instinctively without das. Okay, here's another quote from Rav Nachman in Sichos Haran, where he says that to escape worldly suffering, the Torah provides strength and meaning. And if you look even in the secular world, all about grief and suffering, the experts tell us about meaning making, to make meaning out of things. And this is perhaps even the whole mahus and characteristic of Nichum Avelim. It's another big topic. We're not trying to get into that now. But when we make meaning out of suffering and out of difficult things, and we're able to adopt new perspectives and appreciate it, then it becomes different. We relate to it in a different way. That's what psychotherapy is all about, right? It's about adopting new perspectives and new relationships with old ideas that are going to be more helpful, that are going to help us live a more richer, more effective life. So the Torah provides tremendous strength, tremendous meaning. It helps us to accept things. Here is a fascinating sikha from Rav Nachman and the Sefer Chaim Moharan. I think Lipa Schmelzer has a song on these words, so if they're familiar to you, it's probably because you heard it first by him. And Rav Nachman here is basically saying that you can show up to life on many levels of experience. And what happens with people, especially who are abused, by the way, is that they don't know any better. They have no frame of reference for how life can be lived on a higher level of experience. And all they know is what they grew up with, and they grew up with torture, they grew up with abuse and incest and domestic violence and whatever the things might be, or maybe they were bullied or they were made fun of, and they've always been hating themselves and feeling rejected and that nobody likes them and nobody respects them and nobody notices them. And they don't have another frame of reference, another experience to relate to know, Taka, it could be different. I can actually live life on a higher, more meaningful, richer level. They may not have ever had such an experience. There are people who had a great life and then they went through some very difficult things and they're able to kind of compare the way life is now to the way life was before. Some people don't even have that. Okay, so comes Rav Nachman and says, there are many times that I lived on different levels of experience. Yesh kama mine chayim. There are many ways of living life. V'hakol nikra chayim, and those are all legitimate, acceptable, reasonable ways of living. But today, chayisi chayim tovim shelo chayisi me'olam chayim ka'ira. But today, I never had such a good, rich life full of vitality and chiyus like I had today. And Rav Nachman was a person that was always working on himself and growing. And if you look in the end of the Sikha, he's talking about his understanding of a Kadosh Baruch Hu and connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that when we get closer to Hashem, it gives us life. Ki hu chayecha, and the Torah gives us life, and Hashem gives us life. And so we can actually improve our level of experiencing life in this world. We can live life happier and better. And if we don't know how to do that and we're struggling with that, we can get the tools to do that. And if we need that from a therapist, we need that from medication, then that's our mitzvah. And if we've done that and we also need that from the Torah, then that's part of it too. It's all true, and it's all true together for whatever you need in order to live the life that's going to help you have chiyus, and to get close to Hashem and have a rich, happy life. So here's another place from Rav Nachman. He says to ask God to help you understand your purpose in life. And again, that goes back to the idea of suffering and meaning making, right? Sometimes people want to take their lives because they're missing a feeling of purpose. They're missing a feeling of relevance, a feeling of importance, a feeling needed. And as we're going to see soon in the duration of this talk, it's our job to convey to them that they are needed and they are noticed and they are loved and they are unique and they are appreciated. And not everybody gets to hear that message. And especially if their parents were abusive, if somebody else abused them, then they were taught a different lesson. They were taught, you're not important. I'm going to use you to gratify my taivas. You don't exist. You're not important. Nobody cares about you. And then those people sometimes spoke up to Rabbanim and they weren't believed. And that taught them further that they're not worth anything and they're transparent and they don't make a difference. And you can understand why a person who was abused sexually, for example, might have considered to take their life after hearing certain things in our community a number of days ago, because that's another message that they interpret to mean you're not important, no one's ever going to notice you, no one's ever going to take care of you, you have no role being in this world, no purpose, you're not needed, there's no room for you here. And they say, okay, no room for me here, Zygazone, see you later. And if we want to preserve life, as we're going to see in the duration of this talk, we have to convey to them, you're going to be heard, you're important, you're not see-through, you're not shakuf, as they say in Ivrit, you're not transparent, you're noticed, you're seen, you're taken seriously, we're going to reckon with what you say, listen to it, and act on what you say, and you deserve the fullest dignity and fullest respect. Anyway, so Rav Nachman says, ask God to help you understand your purpose in life, and this is the idea of his baitidus for people that aren't familiar. Rav Nachman prescribed to his followers every single day to meditate and take time to think about the tachlis, as some of the Sfarim call it. What am I here for in the world? What's my purpose? And by the way, some people, if you don't know your purpose because you're broken, your purpose is to stay alive. And that's a very big purpose. That's a very special mitzvah to do that only you can do. Okay? So I know I'm speaking to a broad audience, and I don't know who's going to hear this. Some people, they'll say, what, I'm supposed to be a Rosh Hashiva? I could barely get up in the morning. Yeah, well, that's your purpose. That's your greatness. That's your beauty. That's your greatness. Nobody could do that mitzvah like you. And we're counting on you to do it because we care about you. And Hashem gets such nachas from the fact that you're even trying. And you have, you have the strength to keep trying again and again. That's your purpose. Okay? But in general, it's good for us to figure out our purpose intentionally, and again, I'm addressing this talk to people who are not struggling with those thoughts right now, but it's important for us to know our purpose right before a person gets sick and might die, or right before some bad thing happens. We should be doing this every single day, clarifying this every day, taking that with us, setting aside time for that. And this is not only a Breslov idea. I don't know if you ever learned the Sefer Madregas Ha'adam. You ever read stories about the different Bali Musar and the Chavetz Chaim? So many people did a Hispaidus. You look in the Sefer Charedim, there are many Sfarim that talk about Hispaidus and taking the time to kind of think about who am I, where am I, how did I get here, what do I do, what's my purpose, how can I improve, how can I grow. Part of that involves thanking Hashem for the things that you have, being besimcha with the good parts of who you are, celebrating who you are in your unique role, and then of course also paying attention to the things that need improvement. But all of this gives us a feeling of purpose. And that helps us to make good decisions and to be focused and directed in life. And that helps us to want to live and to be purposeful in this world and do whatever it is that we understood that we need to do. I remember a story. This story must have been, I'm not sure, I'm going to say 13 years ago. Not sure, maybe 13 years ago, not that important exactly, but Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilverberg, if you know who he is, very incredible, inspirational person, fascinating, interesting, unique person. Here in Eretz Yisrael, Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilverberg is actually originally American, speaks English. He came to speak at a Torah institute that I was once affiliated with, and right after he was done talking, I did something a little bit crazy. I was afraid that people were going to, talk to him, and the line was going to be long, and I was so desperate at that point in my life trying to figure out what's my purpose. I felt purposeless. I felt directionless. I didn't understand how am I meant to use my time in this world and my strengths and towards what purpose and what does Hashem get nachas from me from. And I was erroneously comparing myself to all sorts of other people and all sorts of other generations, and that was a mistake. And that was kind of getting me to have my wheels spinning in the air and not feeling a sense of mission and importance. And so I actually jumped over a table. That's a true story. I jumped over a table to make sure I would be the first in line in case anybody else would want to speak to Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg and to ask him this question. So it's a little bit of a crazy thing to do, a bit impulsive of me, but I was a desperate man. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Is that the expression? And so here I was first in line, and eventually other people came to talk too. And asked Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg, I said, I read stories about these different tzaddikim, and they were born geniuses and born into these beautiful homes with like Gedolei Yisrael and these different times of history where like they had no concern in the world. This is the way, some of the books that I read as a kid would portray different people, and it's totally not true, by the way. They just all they did was learn Torah all day, and things came to them so easy, and they would take their horse and go into the forest, and they would just like talk to God all day and take a little satchel of books and study Torah all day. And I said, I don't even know if I'm interested in trying to be the greatest person I could be. Like, I'm 50 steps before that. I'm surrounded with people that aren't like the Baal Shem Tov either, and I have the biggest taivas and fears and lack of motivation, and we live in this hustle bustle world where we never have time somehow to do all the things that we want to do to serve Hashem. And I said, I just don't see how I'm ever going to be able to work on myself and to do Hashem's ratzon at this rate, at this pace. It makes no sense to me. I don't get it. And he said to me, I still remember, it was very powerful. He said, no. He gave a no like that. No. And then he said, only you in this generation with your circumstances and your struggles and your environment, that is the only way that you are going to reach your full potential and not anything else. And then I admitted to him, a little bit funny, and if you know Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg, you would understand this is a very silly thing to say to him. But I said, Rebbe, now that I come to think of it, even if I had a booth in the middle of a forest, I'd probably just sit and watch movies. I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I'd be motivated all day. So I can kind of relate to that and understand. Even if I was given the picture-perfect environment to be like the Baal Shem Tov, I probably wouldn't be the Baal Shem Tov, but I could be myself. I get what you're saying, and thank you very much. And that was a very big moment for me that got me to do a paradigm shift when I was younger. It got me to realize, stop trying to be like other people, but be yourself. And Hashem didn't make a mistake. He put you exactly where you are, and there's a reason for it, and you're meant to be a certain person exactly as you're meant to be within those circumstances, within who you are, with your urges and fears and fantasies and confusions and story and everything. Okay? So that was important for me about making meaning, and we're saying today that making meaning can save lives. It can save our lives because it gives us a sense of vitality and purpose in this world. And here's a fascinating sefer called She'eris Yaakov. This is also from two Breslov Hasidim. Here's the cover. You can look at this from Yaakov Gedalia Tfilinsky. Very interesting. And it's basically a sefer which it's a collection of letters between two friends. They were very young men, and one of them ended up moving from Yerushalayim to the United States, and the other one stayed in Yerushalayim, and they were writing letters back and forth because back in the 60s and 70s, that was just the way that they communicated. That was their WhatsApp, right? And so every letter or every other letter is talking about death and the tachlis and remembering why we're here in this world and using our time properly. And the scary and interesting thing is that the one that was writing all these letters, Rav Yaakov Gedalia Tfilinsky, he actually died very, very young. I didn't have time to re-look this up before this talk, but I think he died at age 30 or 29 or something like this. And in the Sefer, I can look it up later. But, he really prepared for the world to come, and I guess he was prepared and finished with his mission. So there he was, taken by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and sent to Shemayim. So he says here, let's make purpose before we die, so that we don't have to die because we don't have a feeling of purpose, right? Right? He's not talking about our topic, but he says, right? He says first on the other side, right? We got to talk about the tachlis. This is the Breslov code word for why are we here in this world? What are we doing in this world? And then it says, we're writing back and forth as pen pals to remember why we're here in this world. 1 second, just to quiet the telephone here. We're writing back and forth to remember the tachlis in this world. Why did we come to this low, difficult world? And he says at this point in this particular letter, his heart is closed. He's completely confused. And I'm just sleeping in, and I'm not living for the tachos the way that I believe in, of doing tikkun chatzos and doing this bodidus and this special meditation. And we gotta strengthen ourselves, and we gotta remember, I'm here for a purpose, I'm here for a reason, and let's kick into gear and be the best version of ourselves that we could be. Okay, now we're gonna come to the ikar meat and potatoes of this talk. Suicide harming the Tzelem Elokim. So it says in Noach, it says in the pasuk, that a person is not allowed to take his own life. Look at Rashi, look at the Gemara in Bava Kama, look in the Shulchan Aruch, look in Yoredei Siman Shin Mem Hey, look in the Rambam, look in the Torah. They learned from a pasuk in Parshas Noach that we are not allowed to take our own life. This is not a Jewish value. Jewish value is preserving life, not taking away life. And if you look in the Medrash here, I have to look very closely on the screen. Damai Yeshafech, it says over here, right? If somebody murders somebody else, Darash Rabbi Akiva, Kol Mishu Shayvich Damim, anybody who spills blood, Ma'alim Alav Ki'iru Humamayit Es Hadmus Ha'Alyoina. Okay? So, anybody that spills blood, it is as if he is diminishing the demus of above. Ma'atam Shayvich V'chu, Mishum ki b'tzelem Elokim asa es ha'adam. Okay, we're going to translate this and get really into this idea in the next few minutes. It says in Bereshis, Hashem made a man b'tzalmenu kidmusenu. Hashem made man in the image of God. And here it says in Noach, we are not allowed to kill other people or ourselves, because Rabbi Akiva says in this medrash, it is mema'et the demus. It is mema'et this Tzelem Elokim. So without yet knowing exactly what this means, we're going to get to it in a moment, we are seeing a connection between murder and killing oneself, because we learned that from the same pasuk as well, and being mema'et the demus ha'alyona, diminishing the Tzelem Elokim. Okay? Oh, this is a little bit out of order, but it's a good slide nonetheless. The Pele Yoetz here talks as well about what we would give if we just had one more minute of life, right? In the Mishnah in Avos, we said Shuv Yom Echad Lefnei Misascha. The Mishnah in Avos, which says Hayom Katzer B'Hamalacha Meruba. Right, there's so much to do in this world. The day is short. You got to get moving. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, is famous that before he died, he was holding his tzitzis and he was crying, and he was saying that for just a few pennies, a person's able to be zeicha to earn Olam Haba in this world, and now he's going to miss out on that opportunity by going to the next world, and that's also a Mishnah in Avos as well. Right, the Yafeh Sha'al Achaz Ba'ilum Azem Mikol Chai Kairas Ruach Ba'ilum Haba. Right, the greatness of being in this world, moments to moment, living our lives. Every moment is precious. That's why in Shabbos there's the idea of Chaye Shah, the idea of being Mechal Shabbos, even to preserve life for a short amount of time. And we know that pikuach nefesh is doicha, the whole Torah except for the 3 cardinal sins, and again, this shows the great value of life. Every moment of life is a gift, and it's precious, and we're here on a mission from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and as we're going to see soon from a Radvaz that a lot of Rabbanim are quoting, life is not ours to take. Hashem gives life, Hashem takes life. Rav Asher Weiss, when I was talking to him, he said, tell everybody, Hashem is the only one that gives life and takes life. Nobody else. We're here on a mission. We're faithful, loyal soldiers to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and whatever we need to do for us to stay alive and to help others to stay alive, this is the greatest mitzvah. Why did I write Steve Jobs on this slide? So in case you don't know who Steve Jobs is, he's a very famous character in the secular world who died from cancer. But a number of years ago, before he died from cancer, but he got cancer, he was invited to speak at a graduation in Stanford University, and he gave a talk there. It was a very famous talk. And people were telling me about it, and they said, Avi, you got to hear this talk. So one day I made the time and I heard the talk, and he says there that one of the greatest gifts that he had in his life was that God gave him cancer, and this helped him to realize that life is precious and life is short, and he has to make good decisions. And so here we are quoting it from the Torah, and they heard it from Steve Jobs. But this is a what's that sound? That must be an ambulance. This is a universal idea. This is an idea that is meant to motivate us and to give us simcha, because we say that simcha comes through yira, through making good decisions, through making meaning out of the things that happen to us, doing the best that we can in this world, fixing the things that we messed up, making good decisions, etc. Anyway, so we said in the slide before that when a person spills blood, it is mema'et the demos ha'elyona. Okay? We find this connection as well in different Rishonim and Achrayim on Pirkei Avos. I'm going to release this with these pictures so you can look these things up inside. They make this connection that when a person ends their own life, that is mema'et the demos of Hashem, the Tzelem Elokim. It's disrespecting the Tzelem Elokim that they have. We're going to try to understand what that means, but let's just look at another source or two. First, it says in the Torah in Parshas Kiseitze that if there are people who were chayiv misas bezdin and they need to be killed in order to get a kapara, and for all the different reasons that the Torah prescribes capital punishment. So the Torah says there are still dinim, there are still laws that we have to respect the body of the person that died after they were killed by bezdin. And why is that? Why do we have to go out of our way to respect a person who sinned in a serious way, so much so that he had to be killed by bezdin? And again, my Zoom square is blocking some of the sources here, but when you get it, I think you'll be able to see it for yourself. You can also look it up for yourself. But I believe there's a Sforno here, another Rishonim. Let's just see if I could quote it to you here. Right, it says, Zilzule shel melech hu she'adam asui kedmus diyuknai v'yisrael heim banav. Right? There are many sources on this in this pasuk that were made in the image of God. And there's some connection between the human being representing God, and that means that we have a Tzelem Elokim. There's something godly about us. We're made in the image of God. And I guess I'll just jump in now and explain what this means. Hashem has no shape. Look in the beginning of the Rambam. Look in all the Svarim. This is one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Hashem has no shape. He's not a square. He's not a circle, not a man and not a woman. And so when we are made in the image of God, it doesn't mean that we're made in the shape of Hashem. What it means, according to the Rishonim and Achrayim and Mekubalim, is that just like God has the capacity to choose and to create and to destroy and to think and to plan, He gave a micro version of this to mankind, and He asked us to make good decisions. And that's why we have in the pasuk, "Ubacharta b'chaim," you should choose life. We have free will. We have the ability to make good decisions. And this is the godly part of who we are. And very funny story, and I say the story a lot, so don't roll your eyes, or you could, I guess you could roll your eyes if you've heard me say the story many times. But the Maggid of Mezrich had a son, I believe, who became a Hasidic Rebbe, and his name was Reb Avraham, and his students called him Reb Avraham the Malach, Reb Avraham the angel, and he lived in the time of Reb Nachman. And when Reb Nachman of Breslov heard about this, Reb Nachman said, "That's the best name that his students came up from, that he's an angel? Between you and me, an angel isn't the greatest person. You know who's the greatest person? A human being. A human being is greater than an angel." And why is that? That's because we can make mistakes, but we can also make good decisions, even though there's adversity. There's a famous mashal about this from Rav Shalom Shvadron, beautiful mashal, that a person can take a soccer ball, go to a soccer field, and just throw the ball into the goal 150 times, but he doesn't get 150 points for that. The only time that you get points in a soccer game is if there's a goalie and he's trying to block you, and the crowd is cheering and maybe making fun of you and trying to distract you, and you still kick the ball into the goal, then Lafun Tzara Agra, you deserve a point, and that's the greatness and beauty of man. Yes, we make mistakes, but we also use our free will to do great things, and in that way we transcend the angels. We have a lot of classes on this too in the TFRP group and on the channel. And if you want classes about this topic, ask me again in the email. I'll send you the link. And there's a very powerful lesson from Rav Nachman in the Sefer Likutei Eitzos in his Chazkos, I think it's paragraph 10, where he says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't make a mistake when he gave you your Yetzer Hara. He knows exactly what he's doing. He made you with this Yetzer Hara, with these urges and these confusions and these temptations. And he knew that it might bring you to do certain things, but he knew also that within that you're going to try and you're going to struggle and to be the best person that you could be. And all of that was worth it for him. In order for the small efforts, the resilience that we make, despite that it's hard for us. Anyways, this capacity of making good decisions, this is what characterizes the human being. This is what makes us great. And what happens is when we spill our blood or the blood of somebody else, or we disrespect the body of a human being, which represents this idea, and represents the idea of das, awareness, of free will, when we do that, which is the godly part of who we are, then we are disgracing this great godly trait that Hashem gave to us to make the world a better place and to earn schar and to do Ratzon Hashem. And that's really the issue of suicide. And so much so, if you look in the other Mefarshim here on Perkei Avos, they say, be very careful to respect the face of another human being. Never spit in somebody's face, never make fun of how somebody's face looks like, because his face is the window to his soul, and this is, the face is like the main part of a person, right? And this is the most godly representation and physicality of the godly capacity of a person to be a person and to make a decision and to think and to plan and to hopefully make good decisions. And so even treat people's faces with reverence and with respect, and certainly treat everybody with respect. And it says in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that when we slap a person in the face, it's as if we slapped HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here's a few stories about this topic to bring it home even more. I believe his name is Rav Moshe Chait, and all the Chavetz Chaim guys listening to this, if I'm wrong, feel free to email me and correct me with his name. But Rav Moshe Chait was a very big Rav and Rosh Hashiva in the world of the Chavetz Chaim yeshiva system, and he was an orphan. And when this is how a very chashav Talmud Chacham in the Chavetz Chaim world explained the story to me. And he was an orphan in New York many, many years ago. There was no money going around, and one of the things that Jews did a long time ago to make some money was they would box. They would go into a boxing ring, and people would pay them to box, and that's how the people watching would get entertainment. And when this Rav Moshe Chait showed up to the Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva in New York, which was then headed by Rav David Leibowitz Zatzal, so Rav David Leibowitz was trying to get to know this new student of his, and he said, how do you make ends meet? How do you support yourself? And Rav Chait said that he boxes on the weekends or whenever he did it in order to make some income, in order just to survive. He's an orphan, he has no money. And the immediate reaction of Rav David Leibowitz was, what? One Tzelem Elokim boxing another Tzelem Elokim? And this was his reaction. And you see that great people had tremendous respect for other human beings, for how we treat other human beings, for how we talk about them, how we describe them, how we treat them with respect. And so Rav David Leibowitz said, what? One Tzelem Elokim harming another Tzelem Elokim? And there's another story with Rav Mendel Kaplan in the book Rav Mendel and His Wisdom, and I apologize, in this particular instance, I didn't get a chance to verify this and double check this, so I'm going on my knowledge from many years ago on this, but I believe there's a story there with a woman who was haggling with a cashier over cigarettes, and I guess she was a poor woman, didn't have enough money for a pack of cigarettes, and she wanted it for a cheaper price, and the cashier is busy saying to her that, I'm sorry, this is not my store, I can't just give you a pack of cigarettes for the price that you want, it doesn't work that way. And Mendel Kaplan's heart was broken, and he gave the money for the cigarettes, and this is going back in the 60s or 50s. My mother's father actually was a Talmud of Rav Mendel Kaplan in Chicago before he became Rosh Yeshiva in Philadelphia. And And the Talmidim of Mendel Kaplan said, like, why are you giving money and getting involved, and you care about this, unkempt woman's cigarettes? Like, what does that have to do with the Rosh Yeshiva? And he said, she's made Tzelem Elokim. She's made in the image of God. And it breaks my heart to see a person made in the image of God being so disgraced and disgracing themselves and acting on such a low level, and they deserve much more, and they deserve more dignity, and I wanted to restore her dignity by paying for the cigarettes. A very powerful story. And here's a Maisa from Torah Avram. This is one of the most fascinating, mysterious svarim for me in the nefesh Musar world, because it's hard to get one's hands on. It's a very amazing sefer from Reb Avram Grodzinski, and he was affiliated with the yeshiva of Slobodka before the Holocaust. And if you look in this sefer, it says that he was very, very ill and sick and injured in the hospital in Russia, and the Nazis were coming, the Nazis were coming during the time of the Holocaust to take over this town. They were going to burn all the buildings down. They were going to set the hospital on fire, kill everybody in it. And it doesn't have a lot of details here in the story, but basically a decision was made by Reb Avram Grodzinski that the Talmidim, he felt that they weren't able to save him, to carry him to safety. It wasn't working out, and time was, of the essence, time was running out, and they had to save themselves. And again, it's missing a lot of the details here. It's very short on those details and how they came to a decision to leave Rav Avram Grodzinski there, but that was his decision. And Rav Avram Grodzinski, as he's parting with his Talmidim during the Holocaust, knowing that soon he's going to die, and he was already very ill and sick, the thing that bothered him the most was, he said, the Nazis are going to come and they're going to disrespect the Tzelem Elokim. I am a Tzelem Elokim. I represent the image of God. And that hurts me the most, is that they're going to come and disrespect the Tzelem Elokim. And, great people like this, these are some of the incredible things that they're thinking about in their last moments in this world. Okay, so let's get into the halacha about this. And I'm not a paisek by any stretch of the imagination, but nonetheless, I'm going to bring you some very basic halacha, black and white. You can see it for yourself. You can look it up. You can discuss it with your Rav. And I'm not paskening anything, but I just want to show you what the svarim say about suicide. Okay, so we know that suicide is asur. It is absolutely forbidden. There are very strong lashonos. Ein lo chelek legam haba. There's all sorts of lashonos about this. This goes back to Chazal. It's found in Maseches Smachos. We said that it's brought down in Shas. It's brought down in the Rishonim and the Achronim, Shulchan Aruch, Rambam, Torah, and I'm just looking closely here in the Aruch HaShulchan that I have here on the page. Here the Aruch HaShulchan is talking about how there is a circumstance where a person dies by suicide. Here, I'm going to quote you the words. You might have a situation where a person lost his ability to make good decisions. His judgment, for some reason, was so impaired that he no longer had the das to make a good decision. Or maybe he was coerced, so to speak. The word anus, I'm not sure how to translate it without conveying misunderstanding, but he was anus because of some sort of great fear that he had. And so there are certain circumstances and situations from the time of Chazal already. I'm just using the Aruch HaShulchan to show you these words, but this is already in the time of Chazal. The Chazal relate to situations where people end their lives willfully, purposefully. This is a big sin. This is terrible. And, there are cultures today that do this too. And I always say the same silly example just because it's an easy one to mention. If you look at the kamikaze pilots in World War II that were dying for their emperor and trying to win the battle, this is not a Torah idea. This is forbidden. They don't have a chelek olam haba. Sometimes people kill themselves for all sorts of reasons, narcissistic reasons, manipulative reasons, like we saw recently in the news. And, this is when the Torah says that suicide is forbidden, ein lo chelek olam haba, and there are halachic sanctions where we say we're not going to bury him in the same way as other people, we're not going to give him a hesped, etc., etc., and there's all sorts of halachos. But at the same time, in Chazal, going from Chazal all the way down to today, you have many instances where different circumstances happen where a person doesn't have the mental faculties or the right circumstances to make a better decision, or maybe they made a decision out of some different motivations. They were afraid that they were going to be tortured by the enemy, or all sorts of interesting sugyas that are brought down by the Rishonim and Achronim. People try to understand, how did Shaul take his life? That's a big sugya. So in those circumstances, as we're going to see soon, the halachas of suicide, the penalties and halacha of suicide don't kick into gear. And that doesn't mean a person should kill himself, because Rav Asher Weiss said, every time we talk about suicide, you have to stress kedushas hachayim. And every single person, we want to be alive and encourage them and tell them that there's help for them. But we're just talking about how in halacha, there are people like this and people like that. There are people that they make a lucid decision, to quote the words of a Rashiva that I heard talk 2 days ago, a lucid decision with full das and full awareness, a poor decision to kill themselves. That's situation A. And situation B is a person who had impaired judgment. They're struggling with mental illness. They're afraid they're going to be tortured in Guantanamo Bay or whatever it might be. That's a different situation, and the Chazal already relate to this. If you look in the Shut Chasam Sefer, he talks about how when we talk about the penalties in halacha of ma'abed atzmai lada'as, it has to be not da'as. It has to be with da'as. And it has to be with yishuv hada'as, right? And this fits beautifully with what we were saying before about how shvichas damim and suicide is all about disrespecting the faculty of das, the Tzelem Elokim, the quality of Tzelem Elokim that Hashem endowed to us and entrusted with us. But if a person doesn't have das, then it's not ma'abed atzmai, not da'as, right? It's just not the same thing. That doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's mutter, doesn't mean it's encouraged, and we want to reach out to every single person and let them know that there's hope and there's treatments and there's things that can help them, but we're just technically talking about the halachic penalties about suicide. Okay, so here is the Chazal in Maseches Smachos. I see the Zoom square is covering it up over here, but again, even over here, the Chazal are talking about Ma'abed Atzmai Ladas and Halacha Aleph of the second parak, and then in Halacha Beis it says Ezahu HaMa'abed Atzmai Ladas. It's not so simple. We have to discuss what cases. How do you know? Did you see it happen? Are you able to assume in certain circumstances that it wasn't Ladas? Then maybe we could be Mako. Then it brings some fascinating, amazing stories. If you look at Halacha Daled, different stories of people who were, they're tragic stories of people who were frightened and scared because they were threatened by their parents or by other people, and they ended up taking their life, and that's tragic and unbelievable. And we have to be careful to talk gently and respect every single person, and definitely not to threaten anybody. But in those circumstances, those people who took their lives in these Chazal stories out of fear, again, that's not considered ma'abed atzmai lada'as. And I keep purposely saying lada'as, ladas. It's all about das. Okay? And again, I'm going to say from Rav Asher Weiss, we have to do whatever we can to preserve life and remember kedushas hachayim. Okay, so here again in the Aruch HaShulchan in Yoredei Shin Mem Hey, he talks this all about this idea. Here it says also in Darad and in Hey. If you look at Hey, it says that he has to have a das tznuna. He has to have a clear das about what's going on, right? And it says also in Darad. Ein zema abir atzma ladas k'she'asa b'pnei hayira, right? And then he quotes the stories in Maseches Smachos that we just showed you. You can look in the Pischei Tshuva here. Also, again, it's talking about das and yishuv das. And if a person is settled and they're making a bad moral decision to kill themselves, the Torah has the strongest things to say about this. This is inappropriate. This is wrong. This is a big chilul Hashem. Chaim Walder did a big chilul Hashem. This is a chilul Hashem. It's disrespecting the Tzelem Elokim. But when a person ends their life out of mental illness, that's a different circumstance again. This is not recommended. This is not good. This is something that we don't want to happen at any costs. And please, we have to try to prevent this and fight for our own lives and protect life as much as we can. But just the halachic penalties aren't even discussed in that situation. That's not ma'abid atzmai lada'as. I know I'm saying it over and over, but that's because this is the nature of a sensitive topic. We have to make sure to speak about it as clearly as possible. Now, yes, there are circumstances where we have to kill other people in order to make the society better. This is not part of a topic that I wanted to go into, but just if you want to look at Sefer HaChinuch in Mitzvah Lamed Daled, right, and he's quoting a Gemara which says that when certain people are eliminated from the world, ba'avdan ela yisyashev ha'olam yoser, right? Ibud Rishayim Marina. These are all the things a lot of Rabbanim now are quoting, so this is just an interesting source to look up for yourself about that topic. This is a very interesting letter that Rabbi Shul Eichenstein Shlita published a few days ago. Maybe I saw it 2 days ago in the morning. That's when I got it. And he quotes here a Ravaz that everyone's quoting, that life isn't ours to take. This is what Rav Asher Weiss was saying before. Life is not ours to take. The only one that takes life is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He's the one that gives life. He's the one that takes life. We are avadim to Hashem. We are agents of Hashem. We're here on a mission. Let's accomplish our mission as best as we can. And if all we can manage to do is try to stay alive and nothing else, that's our biggest mitzvah. Then he makes a number of interesting points here in the letter. You can read it for yourself. I'm just going to say a very, shitchi outside understanding of this, that a person who lives for themselves in a narcissistic, self-centered, egocentric way, where he's always looking to just gratify himself and everything's about himself, to the exclusion of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the exclusion of other people, and he can't see in relationships anything beyond himself. That type of person, he has a certain plan of how to gratify himself, and when that plan finishes, then he just finishes his life, because he's here on his own mission for his own self-gratification. But if we're here as an agent of Hashem, and we're here on a mission, and our mission is to be alive in this world so long as Hashem doesn't take our lives from us, then we can't take our lives. We're here on a mission. We have to be faithful to Hashem. We're soldiers, and we got to stick to our post and do our duty as much as we can. And, of course, even save our lives and get treatment and get help. But if you view everything about just being yourself, and I'm here for myself, and I use other people for my own gratification, I could abuse women and children and just use them for my own pleasure. So then it's all about myself, aniva afsi oid, and this very narcissistic, sociopathic view of the world. And then, okay, I could take other people's lives, I could take my lives. It doesn't make a difference, right? Then the Rav here, Rav Eichenstein, quoted a Chazon Ish in the 4th parak of Hamuno Bitachon, and I have yet to look this up. Always look things up, and it's not that I disrespect Rav Eichenstein, no. But it is a rule I learned in yeshiva. You always look up sources. By the way, that's why I quote you sources, and I always try to show you what I'm quoting so you can see it for yourself. This is how we're going to quote Torah responsibly. This is also our Torah. We get to look at the Radvaz too. It's not exclusive. We're sharing it with one another. This is our Torah too. So it's not because I disrespect or suspect the Rav that he's not quoting it, but it's always good to look things up. Anyway, so I didn't look the Chazon Ish up yet, but apparently the Chazon Ish there says that at the very core of a person is the need to basic dignity and to respect and to what the letter here calls oineg. Oineg is that joy. And if you think, I had a very significant conversation with a Chashav Talmud Chacham in Yerushalayim named Rav Zev Rudman. Maybe some of you have heard him. And Rabbi Rudman was saying that people who take their lives, often, in some of the circumstances that we described, their Tzelem Elokim was diminished before the moment that they took their life. In other words, at the core of a person's being is the need for basic dignity, basic respect. He quoted to me one of the Rishonim that says that the nefesh is called kavod. At the source of our nefesh is the need for kavod, and we're not talking about negative kavod. We're talking about the basic need for a certain level of respect, that I exist as a person. Here I am in this world. I have a mission. I have a basic purpose here. I'm unique. I'm needed. I'm wanted. Hashem created me. There's only one of me, so it must be that the world needs me, right? And when an abuser comes and takes that away from somebody, whether it's through their words or through their actions by touching them and doing inappropriate things with them, you're taking away that basic respect that was keeping them alive and keeping them feeling like a dignified person. And so there's this process where some abused people, they lost their dignity and their Tzelem Elokim before the moment that they're battling with taking their life or not. And the practical lesson, said Rav Zev Rudman Shlita, of what we're talking about today is to try to restore the dignity to the survivors and to the people who are downtrodden and to the people who are broken. Let's give them back that basic dignity. Let's give them back that respect, and let's give them back that joy and life and that basic level of chiyus, of vitality needed to exist in this world. And going on this topic, so it says in the Sefer Chaim Moharan that Rav Nachman met some people who made some really big mistakes. They did aveiros, and he says they were munachim berefesh. They were mamish. They buried themselves in dung. We're not talking about physical dung, but we're talking about people that they made some bad choices in life, and they made some really big errors and mistakes, and we're all busy beating ourselves up for the errors and the averos and mistakes that we made. So Rav Nachman would take these people and he would restore to them the Tzelem Elokim on their face. So here again, the amazing connection between the basic dignity and the Tzelem Elokim. And Rav Nachman was seeking to restore the Tzelem Elokim on their face, and he said he could tell the difference physically on their face after he gave them chizik, after he started working with them. And again, if we're a person like this and we're struggling with trying to maintain our basic dignity, and we feel that nobody needs us, nobody wants us, and we're transparent and there's nothing important about us and nobody cares about us, we have to seek to restore our dignity. Let's find the tzaddikim and the therapists and the lessons and the perspectives that are going to help us to restore our Tzelem Elokim as well. From Nachman, interesting here, if you look in the footnote here in Shin Vav, it quotes a sefer from quote from Siach Sarfei Kodesh. That's a very special sefer, actually written by a Rebbe of mine that died young from a heart attack. Rav Avram Nachman Simcha ben Elazar Weizhandler, Zatzal, his neshama should have an aliyah, one of the most special Rebbeim I ever had. And it says in that sefer from Rav Nachman all sorts of fascinating things that are not written down in other form, and they were passed down generation to generation. And so over there it says that for a person to fully have the Tzelem Elokim, this dignity, this ability to make good choices, to be the higher version of themselves, to fully have that, a person has to learn all of Shas. So I bet you weren't expecting that from Rav Nachman, but there it is. So we got to learn Torah, got to learn Shas. Rav Nachman here in Sichos Haran says a fascinating thing, that depression causes a person to forget his name. And I think what this might mean is that what's something that's unique about you is your name. Your name kind of captures who you are, right? Think of any famous person, we refer to them by their name. Who am I? I'm Avi Tenenbaum. That's who I am. Who are you? You're Shalom Goldstein. Each person, I refer to myself by my name. You refer to yourself by your name. That's how you capture the person. Famous people, regular people, you capture people by their name. I'm Avi Tenenbaum. You're who you are. I am who I am. And when we're depressed, we forget our name. We forget our calling. We forget our uniqueness. And we lose that kavod, that dignity, that respect, and that oneg that the Chazon Ish was talking about. And then we make poor choices, and our Tzelem Elokim becomes jeopardized, and then our judgment becomes impaired, and then we can make some bad decisions, and chas v'shalom, even fatal decisions. And so again, let's try to fight depression with all the different tools that we have at our disposal, which of course I'm going to keep saying therapy, medication, and Torah. I would say Torah first in the order of importance, but just I think that's an obvious one to the front people listening, but I can't say enough about psychotherapy and medication. It's so important, and some people need that, and that's the ratzon of Hashem, and that's your mitzvah to do that. Okay, but depression can cause a person to forget their name. Okay, so we're going to try to always restore that back to the person. It also says later on in the Sikha, if you read on, it says that by sharing happiness with somebody else, you can literally save their life. Sometimes a person is going through so much suffering and torment in their minds, maybe even just private things that you're not even aware of. You don't even know the amount of pain, the mental suffering and pain that they carry with all day. It says many times in the Sfarim, also in these types of Sfarim, the Breslov Sfarim, that the Ikar Yisurim are Yisurei Nefesh, those thoughts that people carry around, that they think nobody likes them and nobody wants them, they're not important. And that's the type of stuff some people are struggling with hours a day, every single day, during the holidays and on the weekends and on vacation and in their beds at night. There's not a moment that they're not tortured with those thoughts, and you don't know what people are going through. And with happiness, if I'm happy and I can share some of that happiness with you, if you have some happiness, you can share that with somebody else. You can give them a smile. You can restore to them their dignity, give them a compliment. You can save their life. Many stories on that. We're coming to the end of the talk. So here's just a few final points to wrap up, and then we're going to be masakim and finish. So it says in the Mishnah, in Aves Havidan, it's called Adam L'Kav Schos, or Ha-Adam L'Kav Schos. Very interesting Divrei Torah on Adam, Ha-Adam. But, everybody says that you should judge people favorably, because if you do that, then Hashem will judge you favorably, and this is the midah of Hashem, and all this type of thing. And I found a fascinating pshat here as well in these Mefarshim on the Pirkei Avos. They say that don't only judge people favorably for Hashem. That's true. And don't only judge people favorably so Hashem judges you favorably. That's also good. But even just relationship advice, if you want good relationships, if you want to be able to be mistader, to get along in this world and function as best as you can, sometimes you come at an impasse where you see people that made decisions that you disagree with. Sometimes a person that was a loved one to us, right? It could be people listening to this have an uncle or a child or a brother that took their life by suicide, and we're grappling with that, and we're not understanding why did they do that, and we have such anger, and it caused us such shame and turmoil and upheaval in the family. So here's just an interesting source. It says, judge other people favorably, even for yourself, for relationships. If you want to stay close with somebody, even if they're deceased, you want to stay close and maintain a relationship, right? Because a relationship with a person exists forever. That doesn't go away whether the person's alive or not alive. If you want to maintain good relationships, judge people favorably. And to go back to some words that Rav Asher Weiss told me in that important conversation, he said that after a person took their life, sometimes we need to understand we can't possibly, in most situations, I'm not talking about some of the high-profile mistakes that some bad people made after bad decisions that they made. I'm not talking about those people, but I'm talking about, most cases you're ever going to hear in your life that happen to people that we know, people that are close to us. They took their lives because of mental illness. Their judgment was impaired. Their Tzelem Elokim was impaired. It was taken from them. Their dignity was stripped from them. And we're grappling with the decisions that they made. Let's judge them favorably. Rav Asher Weiss Shrita said, we can't know what was going in their mind. We can't judge them. We were never in that situation. And if you were in that situation, you know exactly what that's like. And it's unbelievable agony that no words can describe. So we can't judge them. We can't judge them. And so after a person makes such a decision, there's a room for compassion, understanding within the rubric of the Torah that we tried to present today, that some things happen because people have impaired judgment. And that's why it's so important, like we keep saying practically, restore their judgment, help save their lives. Let's do suicide prevention. Let's prevent them from making decisions out of that impaired judgment. Let's get them back their mental faculties and their joy and their basic dignity. Let's connect them to medications and therapists and programs and Torah perspectives and whatever they need to live a life. Also says here from Rav Nachman, a lot of times if we know somebody that died by suicide, we beat ourselves up for it and we say, what more could we have done? We should have done this, we should have done that. And, I've spoken to many people in this situation, and you interview them, and they did everything they could and more than that. And they're busy beating themselves up and blaming and guilt and feeling like it was never enough. And, at the end of the day, a lot of experts say this in the secular world, and you could find this right here in the writings of Rav Nachman. People have free will. We're not omnipotent, to quote Jordan Peterson. He once spoke about suicide. We're not omnipotent. We're not a Kadosh Baruch Hu. You can't control the whole world. We're very limited. The Mishnah says in Avos, Ein alecha hamalacha ligmor v'yata ben chayrin libatla hemen. Right? You can't take on the whole world and fix everything, and that also doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. So we got to be cognizant of our limitations and do as much as we can, and recognize that if something didn't exactly turn out the way that it did, that's not necessarily our fault. You're not God. We can't control other people. Again, I'm talking about in a situation where people were responsible and took the right decisions and did the best that they could, right, to help somebody else. And again, that's why I keep encouraging us, let's take those courses and get that knowledge about suicide prevention. And if this is a parent struggling with a child in this situation, go to a support group of a really big expert and learn from other parents that were trained in this and from the therapist how to manage these situations. There's a lot of people out there with this knowledge. Go learn it. That's, I'm trying to be practical. But Rav Nachman here says it's very hard to influence a person. It's very hard to influence anybody to do anything because they possess free will. People have freedom of choice, right? You can't force people to do stuff. It just doesn't work. They have their own mind and their own decisions, and we can try and we can influence and we can do our best, but people ultimately have free will. And even for a big tzaddik like Rav Nachman, who had brilliant divrei Torah, and he was a charismatic person, he was so inspirational, he said it's very hard to influence another person. Kol sheken achas kama v'kama, a person whose faculties are impaired, they're struggling with depression and with anxiety and shame and all sorts of things, and they're not able to use the full koichos of their mind to think lucidly like you and I might be able to think at this time. And Rav Nachman in another place says that if he wanted to, he could try to cancel the free will of his Talmidim. He could overwhelm them so much with such inspirational ideas and Torah that it would just be magnificent and incredible. He said, but you know what? What would be the point of that? The whole point of why we're here in this world is to work on ourselves and to be loyal, faithful soldiers to Kadosh Baruch Hu, do the best that we can. So why would I take that opportunity from somebody else? Like we said earlier in the talk, the whole greatness of man over an animal and over a angel is that he's in the struggle, he's in the battle, he's trying, he's making an effort, and even if the outcome and the results aren't perfect, he's trying, he's putting in the work, he keeps showing up, he's resilient, he keeps showing up to the battle another day. And Rav Nachman said, even if I could take away somebody's free will, that's what makes them special, that's what makes them great. And he was talking here about sin and those types of things. Obviously, if we could take away somebody's free will to save their life, we probably would, and that's what we do. If there's no other recourse, we'll call the police to come and take the person and bring them to a hospital, even if they're not collaborative, because we care about them and there's no other recourse. There is an idea like that. But obviously, if we can, we try to be collaborative and have them make decisions together with us. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they have free will. We have different classes on what free will is. It's very misunderstood. If you don't know how to access these, it's worth listening to them from Rav Volba and Rav Dessler. It says in the Altar of Kelm over here that a person who lives life without das, without awareness, which we're equating now with the Tzelem Elokim, which we say we're paygame when we commit suicide, when we take lives with suicide. Committing suicide is, there's a lot of talk about not using those words anymore, but I grew up with those words. So says the Altar of Kelm that when a person lives without das, without this higher consciousness and awareness, it's as if they're dead. It's as if they're dead. And so, that's a way that we can judge somebody the kav schus. He's referring to it that you have to work on das. And us as people trying to help other people who are struggling, we have to try to restore to them their das. And if we're one of these people who don't have das, we can be gentle on ourselves and understand, you don't have your full koyches, we understand you. Try to get those back. Let's try to get in therapy. Let's get medications, antidepressants, whatever the doctors and experts suggest, hospitalization. And let's do what it takes in order to save a life, because life is so precious. It says in Chazal, if you have das, your awareness about yourself and your decisions, you have everything. If you don't have it, then you really have nothing. And it doesn't help all your book smarts and all the things people are going to tell you and what they're going to convince you. It's hard to hear that and to feel that and to go with that. So let's do whatever we can to restore das in other people, mental health in other people, and awareness in other people, the ability to make good choices in other people, and to do this with ourselves too. It's the greatest mitzvah we could do. The Rambam says in Shmeina Prakim, which I couldn't find a copy of Shmeina Prakim in the house, I'm not sure where it is, I gotta find it, and in the Yad, right? And we don't need the Rambam necessarily for this, but we know that the soul can get sick, there are chayle nefesh, and we can adopt new perspectives, and we can work on our midos. And by the way, there's a big misunderstanding. Midos means traits. It doesn't mean that if a person's midos are skewed, they're a bad person. But it just means that there's something out of order. There's too much of something, too little of something else. And that's what therapy comes to do, right? Is to kind of offer balanced perspectives and new perspectives and the right measurement of how to do certain things and how to work on things and overcome certain things. And that's what therapy is about, right? So the Rambam here says that if a person is struggling with a machlas nefesh, he should go to the chacham that knows how to teach him how to straighten those things out and make order and find the right balance. And here's a very funny quote from Rabbi Victor Miller. I wanted to really put him in. He was such a special person, Rabbi Miller. And I actually only met him once in my life, and I consider that very special. I'm very grateful that I was able to meet him that one single time, just to be able to see such a special person. So Rabbi Victor Miller here says in his Torah on the Hilchos Deis of the Rambam, he says that if a person is sick, they got a sore throat, okay, they've got COVID-19, you wouldn't tell them to go to the med school and to start learning how to be a doctor, because that's not going to heal him and make him better. So having this theoretical, technical knowledge and book knowledge, that's really wonderful. It's great and, really nice. But that's not what heals the chayle nefesh. What heals the chayle nefesh is a roife nefashos coming and taking concepts which from the Torah and also from today from therapy with an expert therapist that's an expert in his field, and and taking those ideas and understanding what the person himself on an individual level is struggling with and applying them to that person and working together to balance those things out and find those right perspectives and find the right measurement of every single thing. Here's a very powerful sikha from Rav Nachman in Sichos Haran, where he says that even a person who his judgment is impaired, if all he did was work with somebody whose judgment isn't impaired, he can save himself and live a productive life. And so again, we're encouraging, go to therapy, go to who you need to get better, trust them. Some people have such problems with trust, gufa, because they were abused by somebody of authority, by a therapist. Somebody came to me last night and told me they were abused sexually by their therapist. I'm telling you guys, I was brokenhearted last night. I was broken. It's hard for me to get broken, but I was broken, okay? Regular chaos I'm used to. I was finished dealing with the problems of the whole world. It was late last night, and I went to the Beis Medrash to learn. And in the Beis Medrash, somebody came over to me and told me that they were sexually abused by their therapist. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that, my friends? Can you imagine that? Such a tragedy. And thank God they had the bravery and the courage to report that person, and now they're seeing another therapist too. But I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you, I was speechless. And I'm so brave and so happy that because of all the conversations of Rabbanim and community leaders, people are coming out and they're getting help and they're doing what it takes to make the community safer and to get the help that they deserve. Oh my. So Rav Nachman says in Sichos Haran that, again, if a person has impaired judgments, but they're able to connect themselves, attach themselves to somebody else who can walk them through those moments and through those situations, that can restore their health and keep them healthy and safe. If you know anything about DBT programs, right, there's a component like this in those programs too. There's a concept like that. And we can be a good friend to somebody who's going through these situations too. We should maybe ask an expert therapist on how to support such a person, what to say and what not to say. And then there's the component of self-care, how to take care of ourselves as we're going through helping somebody else dealing with these things, because they're hard to deal with. And you have to know how to kind of, work through that difficulty and not be broken yourself. Because if you're broken yourself, then you can't sustainably help the other person. There's so much to say, guys. There's so much to say. Get training in this stuff. Learn about this stuff. But, but let's attach ourselves to people who are lucid, who are healthy, and use them in our moments of weakness so that we stay safe. Oh, I wish I can give another hour of shir just on this beautiful idea from Rav Nachman. I'm just going to tell you very shortly, Rashi Prakim, not even Rashi Prakim. I don't even know if I have the strength right now for Rashi Prakim, but Rav Nachman taught hundreds and hundreds of Torahs. And to go back to the person in the suicide conference in the beginning of this talk, that they felt their life was saved by Rav Nachman. I couldn't have made that up myself. But a person who does not keep Shabbos, does not keep mitzvahs, said this at the talk in front of people just like them about Rav Nachman. I was not expecting Rav Nachman to be brought into the conversation at a suicide conference. So Rav Nachman, of the hundreds and hundreds of lessons that he taught, and his Talmidim and Talmidim, and there's so many voluminous books of Rav Nachman's teachings, and they're beautiful and they're incredible. There's the Sefer Meshivas Nefesh, which is a collection of things that Rav Nachman said to be mechazik people and give people strength. You need a teacher to teach it to you. It's a little bit hard to understand by yourself. It's translated in English. I think it's called Restore My Soul. But anyways, Rav Nachman had a Torah called Azamra, and it's the Torah Reish Pei Beis 282 in Likutei Moharan, which is a very difficult sefer. And Rav Nachman says, of all the Torahs, repeat that Torah 282, Azamra, Reish Pei Beis. Repeat it over and over. Take it with you every day in your life, and it's really going to help you to live a full life. And I have to tell you that when you look at it, you're not always going to understand it right away. It took me 10 years of learning this Torah every single year, over and over and over, till I fully appreciated it on the level that I do now, and I might and hope to understand it even better in the future. Beautiful Torah, and it talks there about people who are so broken and so shut down, and they have such self-hatred, and they just don't know how to find anything good about themselves. That dignity we spoke about, is taken away. They've been violated. They've been broken. They're so hopeless about who they are and their role in this world and their value. And Rav Nachman is addressing this, and he prescribes a series of steps of how to get out of that and to become a happy, healthy person. And then if you look in the Sefer Likutei Halachos, which is on the screen here, in Orach Chaim Aleph Aleph, it's the first piece in the whole Sefer. He expounds on that Torah Reish Pei Beis. He quotes part of it, and he goes on and on and on explaining it. And I'm telling you, even if you go and hear a bunch of shiurim on it, it's something that it's an acquired taste. It cooks. It takes, like there's a good brisket sometimes. It takes like a day or two to cook, right? This Torah is like that, and it's worth it. Invest your time to learn this Torah, understand it. Maybe Hashem will give us the skos to teach a class on it in the future. But it's all about giving us simcha and vitality and restoring our own dignity. What are the therapeutic self-help processes that we can do on our own to have self-compassion, to understand ourselves, to love ourselves in the right way, not the wrong way that the author of Ken was against, but to believe in ourselves and to have the emunah that we have a unique purpose in this world. We're a child of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're special. We're great. And how to do that. Rav Nachman here says a fascinating thing. I was blown away when I originally saw the Sikha a number of years ago. I think it's in Tafnun Gimel. He says here, listen to this. Listen to this. Can you imagine a Rosh Hashiva or Tzaddik today saying this? Said Rav Nachman. He said, you followers, you guys hold me as this big Tzaddik, as a Tzaddik Gomer, but you should know that even if I did some of the biggest Averas in the world, I wouldn't let it take me down. And I would come right back. I would be resilient. I would do tshuva. I'd make a comeback right away and keep serving Hashem. And then I would do tshuva. Big deal. I don't even think I noticed that till now. And then I would do tshuva. The idea of resiliency. Let's be resilient people. If you don't know what the word resiliency is, learn it. Study resiliency. Study about post-traumatic growth. Study about how people who went through the toughest things in the world, including sexual abuse, domestic violence, and all sorts of tragedies and things that we deal with, they come through it. They make it through. They're resilient. There's so much to say that I don't want to even start because it'll be a whole shiur by itself. Again, maybe we'll be zeicha to give shiurim about that in the future. I wrote articles about this on my website. You can look at some of them. But Rav Nachman said even if he made the biggest mistake in the world, he'd make a comeback right away. He'd be resilient, and then he would do tshuva. So we got to be resilient people. I wasn't sure to put this into the talk. We're coming to a close, but I decided I would. And it says here in the bottom of the right page in the top of the left, it says here in this sefer again from Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman in the sefer Kleichvei Or from in the Breslov tradition a long time ago. This was again a Talmud of Rav Nachman. I hope that I got that right. It was 3 generations later. Feel free to correct me always by email, and then I'll be able to be better next time. I want to say things the right way. But Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman says here, we got to give the Yetzer Hara a different name. We got to give him a more accurate, helpful name, a more practical name. We're not even going to call him anymore Yetzer Hara, evil urge. Rak b'shem koyach hamedame. Okay, so he's quoting this from somewhere else in Likutei Maran. You can look that up. He talks about this over here. There are different names of the Yetzer Hara. And what I think it's saying here is that, we make bad decisions because we imagine that it will be good. Whether it's even to touch and harm other people, it's because the, person is imagining that's going to be really nice and really geshmak. And a person who imagines taking their life is imagining that that's going to be a good idea. The Yetzer Hara is all about imagination, and it's not a lot about reality. This is also a big topic, but when they get into restoring people who harmed other people in jail, in the corrective justice system, and they're trying to teach them how to be healthier people and not harm people anymore, one of the things they do is empathy training, amongst many other things. They teach, can you imagine what it's like to be the other person that you mugged, that you sexually abused, that you touched? Can you imagine the Gehenna that was like for the other person? And they couldn't until now because they were just busy in their fantasies, egocentric fantasies. the Yetzer Hara shows up in imagination. And I'm saying this for every person about every scenario right now. We imagine it would be better without us in the world, so we want to take our lives. We imagine this, we imagine that, and you should know that's the Yetzer Hara. It's the Yetzer Hara. That's part of the Yetzer Hara, is he shows up to us not only with, sweet temptation to look at bad things on the internet. That's a certain type of Yetzer Hara. But there's the Yetzer Hara of imagination. And that imagination can take us out of reality and to pretty bad, dark places, to harm other people and to harm ourselves. And we have to be stuck to the reality, gripping to the reality. And if we can't, we should attach ourselves to people who are, like we said before. This is going to be helpful to us too. I think this is the last slide in the talk for today. And Rav Nachman here says in the Sefer Likutei Moharan, an amazing thing if you look in the second volume in Torah Mem Ches, and this is called the Igeres, the Neder. This is a very famous piece in Likutei Moharan. And basically it says here that there was a great person, and people suspect that Rav Nachman is saying it about himself. He's just not, wanting to say it about himself. But Rav Nachman says there was once a very, very great person who really made good decisions, and he went through this world and through the different nisyonos, tests and suffering and trials and tribulations, and he tried to do the best job that he could. And he said, he did an okay job, but if somebody just would have come up to him earlier in his career, in his life as a tzaddik, and would have given him some chizik and would have said, hang tight, you're doing good, keep going, we're supporting you. He says, I know for sure I would have become a much greater person. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? A person who is such a great tzaddik, and he admits, if somebody only would have come to me earlier and said, you're doing great, you're doing good, keep going, hang in there, then he says, I would have become even greater than I was now. So everybody needs encouragement. You know what's even interesting? I remember reading Rabbi Freifeld Speaks, and he quotes this Likutei Moharan, Ayin Sham, it's in the book. I think he quotes it B'Shem Reb Nachman too. Great man, right? Great man, Reb Freifeld. But, okay, so let's give encouragement to ourselves. Let's give encouragement to others. If you learn anything in therapy about self-compassion, what self-compassion is basically, your best friend is going through something hard. He comes to you for chizik. What would you tell him? Go and tell that to yourself, right? Dr. Kristen Neff, there's a lot of people that talk about these things today. And Rav Nachman says everybody needs encouragement. Even the biggest tzaddik needs encouragement. People make this thing that tzaddikim are these, not human people. We're going to give a whole shiur on that too. They're human people. Famous letter from Rav Hutner. They have feelings. They have nisyonos. Things are hard for them. They need encouragement. They need friendship. And there's a lot of sources on this too. We're all battling the Yetzer Hara. We're all on the narrow bridge. Rav Nachman says being in this world is like a narrow bridge. We're trying to walk on that narrow bridge, not to fall too much this way, not to fall too much that way. And Rav Nachman says, the main thing is, don't be afraid. And in another lashon in the beginning of Sichas around his, don't let despair get to you. Get hope. Connect yourself to the things that you need. We said in this talk, to therapy, to hospitalization, to medicine. Get the knowledge and training that we need to help other people and do suicide prevention, just to wrap up. And we spoke about restoring people's dignity and treating people in a way that we remind them that they have a Tzelem Elokim, that they have a certain basic of dignity and respect that we're restoring to them. And let's try to relate to people this way and relate to ourselves in this way. And this is how we're going to save lives. And we also said earlier to remember death. Death is something along the way. So let's remember that in a positive way, to make the best decisions that we can and to live the fullest, most beautiful, happiest life, to cherish life. And we should be matzliach in serving Hashem. Hope this was helpful. Everyone should have tremendous hatzlacha. Yashar koach.